Ahoy there, Captain Benzie here, coming at you with another ship fitting guide for EVE Echoes. In today's video we're going to be continuing our little mini-series on the different Tech 9 battleships by having a look at everybody's favourite space potato, the Gallente Federation Dominix. Now, this is one of those ships that has been heavily requested on this channel. Now, Geekerforta did do a fantastic little guide on this ship, but with enough of you asking, I thought, yeah, you know what, time to take this out for a spin and give my own little look at it. It is, of course, a popular ship, as it is a Gallente Federation drone ship. I know the Vexor is a very popular line, as is the Prophecy, our good friend the Space Turkey, and the Dominix is kind of the next step up from that. So, we're going to jump in, have a look at what this is, how it works, and how you can use it. Now, if you do enjoy this video, let me know by hitting like on it, sub to the channel for all things EVE Echoes, ding that notification bell to never miss an upload, and let me know in the comment section down below which ships and what topics you want to see me cover in future content. If you do want to go the extra mile to help support this channel, you can do so by joining us on Patreon, or by heading over to our merchandise store on Redbubble. Links are in the description below if you're interested in checking those out. Finally as well, don't forget to check yesterday's video, which was on the Megathron, for a giveaway for 2 months of combo Omega for 2 lucky winners, so good luck to anyone who entered that. It is not too late yet. We will be doing the draw on that on Monday. Anyway folks, that all said and done then, let's jump right into talking about the Gallente Federation Dominix. You'll find the Dominix in the Gallente Federation ship tree. Of course, it is a Tech 9 battleship. We've already covered the Megathron in a previous video, so now today we're going to be looking at the Dominix. And if we just look at this, you can see why it's referred to as the space potato. It is a very lumpy and rather unusual design, but it does get 2 very cool skins. Anything that gets the fire skins, I'm all for. These are incredibly cool looking skins. That sort of dark metallic flame with the red fire on it as well. Very cool. I also really like the Rose Thorn. We've talked about this before in the Guardian Scarlet video. I really like the Rose Thorn skins. That sort of subtle gold there in with that metallic purple just looks awesome. Anyway, so enough about how it looks, let's have a look at its stats. So, for a fitting profile, the Dominix has a massive 5 drone launching tubes. These can launch small, medium, or large drones as required. You have then 4 high slots, 3 mid slots, and a whopping 6 low slots. Now, the 4 high slots in this case around are actually our supplemental damage. You kind of use those for dealing with other little threats and things that perhaps your drones otherwise might struggle to deal with, and there's a lot of different options we can have there, as we'll come to later. The 3 mid slots gives us a little bit of sort of electronic warfare, capacitor warfare, tackling, that kind of thing. There's a couple of different options that we can put in there. The 6 low slots, however, gives us a multitude of options. We can go heavy into tank, we can put a lot of different weapon upgrade modules in there, we can put propulsion systems in there. There's a lot of space to put a lot of different systems, which is very, very cool. We then, of course, have 3 combat rigs and 3 engineering rigs. I still want to call them mechanical and power grid, even now, combat and engineering rigs. Cargo hold is actually on the smaller side for a battleship at only 1200 cubic meters. It's big enough to do what you need to. If you're going to be encounter running with this, you're going to be jumping from mission to mission to mission, picking up loot as you go. It's a decent enough cargo hold that allows you to carry a lot of stuff. Defensively speaking, this is one of the tankier of the Tech 9 battleships, 70,441. Now, the majority of that is in structure, shortly followed by armour. Shields lag a little bit further behind, but of course 16,830 shield hit points is still a lot of shield to claw through. Still going to take a long time to clear that. If we head down, we get a semi-decent capacitor here. It's more than enough, considering that most of our weapons here aren't going to be using any form of capacitor at all. In fact, you know, you're going to be using mainly drones which use no capacitor whatsoever. It's only your highs, mids, and lows that are going to be touching the capacitor in this case, and none of those are particularly vital weapon systems in comparison. It is lower than some of the other battleships, but it's more than enough for what the Dominix needs, since it's not a capacitor-hungry ship. Signature radius is massive, and the flight velocity is very slow. This is a battleship. It's not a target that you're going to have any struggle hitting at all. If you're flying a battleship, you know that your paintwork is going to get scratched the second you undocked, just because you are that big. Scan resolution 116mm as well is a very small scan resolution, which means it does take a long time to lock onto, especially those smaller ships, and things like drones, frigates, and destroyers. Anyway, very high mass, with a somewhat low inertia modifier, still a very slow, cumbersome ship regardless. Let's move into the trait description then, because this is where things get interesting with Dominix. Now remember, this is definitely a drone ship. We've got 5 drone launching tubes, and if that weren't clear, the fact that it gets bonuses from large drone operation should really help you out there. 40% increased drone DPS for each level of large drone operation. That's insane. That's 200% additional drone DPS if you've got large drone operation at 5, which you should. You get an additional 25% drone optimal range and 25% drone tracking speed, which means they're good at then hitting their targets, extra long range, and good damage application. Very nice indeed. Finally, battleship command is a necessity here, as this is going to give us 10 kilometers of additional drone control range per level. Now that's a full 50 kilometers drone control range if you've got that fully trained, and if you're then at full drone training as well, if you've trained the drone skill right the way up, that's going to give you a massive 85 kilometers of raw drone control range. That's an insane amount of range. So we're getting a lot of additional drone DPS, plus the ability for those drones to actually apply that damage to targets, and we're getting some rather insane ranges. I'm pretty sure you can already guess where we're going to be going with this fitting, but just in case, let's move over to that section of the video. One of the most powerful aspects of any drone ship is its sheer versatility. Of course, you can change drones out for different situations if you want a different type of drone for a different type of damage, if you want a large drone to be able to do lots of damage against a big target, if you need to swap down to small or medium drones to better apply damage against smaller or faster moving targets, you can do that with drone ships. Also, it's notable here, if we just have a quick look again back at the Dominix skills, there is nothing here at all that mentions any form of high slot. We're not getting bonuses to cannons, lasers, missiles, railguns, or decomposers, so you can quite comfortably fit any of those. Now in this particular build, of course, I'm going for a range build here. I have therefore gone for large cannons, and we'll talk about why in just a moment. Before we do that, however, I just want to draw your attention to, first of all, how I have got the drone control radius here, drone control range here up to 100 kilometers. To me, that is a key point on this particular build, and I've done that by using one single drone control range augmenter 3 to take up the 85 kilometers I've got thanks to the skills and the ship itself, up by a further 15 kilometers to hit that 100 kilometer mark. Now, why is that important? Well, simply put, because we're going to be using sentry drones. Here I've got a full stack of Mark 9 Wardens. Now, Mark 9 Wardens have an optimal range, when fitted to the ship here, of 93.75 kilometers with an accuracy fall-off of 56.7. Now, this is important because that means at 100 kilometers, they're almost in their optimal range. They're going to be doing their massive amount of 235 DPS from a distance of 100 kilometers. That is absolutely insane. Now, the reason that the drone control range is so important here is because of how drone control range works. Now, I've been informed that it is actually a bug. Drone control range should be relative to your ship and the drones you're using. That means as long as the drone is within 35 kilometers of your ship, if you've got 35 kilometer drone control range, you should be able to attack anything that is in that range. Therefore, if you're dropping a sentry drone, then as long as you're within 35 kilometers of the sentry drone, it should be able to shoot at any target, even if the target is outside of your drone control range. It doesn't matter that my target is miles away. I'm not trying to control my target. I'm only controlling the drone, and the drone control range is supposed to be kind of the distance that your ship has an influence over its drones. As such, the fact that if I drop a Mark 9 Warden off any other battleship, if I just drop it into space next to me with a 35 kilometer drone control range, the fact that it can only shoot at something within 35 kilometer range does appear to be a bug. Anyway, we can get away with it here on the Dominix either way, because we've got 100 kilometers drone control range, meaning the optimal range and accuracy fall off here means I'm doing almost 100% damage with my drones from 100 kilometers away. Now that 100-kilometer range is important to me, and that's why I've gone for large strike cannons here in the high slots. Yes, I could have gone for things like missiles, but missiles tend to have that pesky large explosion radius and the slow explosion time, which means even if you're hitting a target at massive range, you're still going to struggle to actually apply damage to the smaller targets. Whereas the strike cannons, the fact is, at a target that's got a low angular velocity and long range, as long as they're within the optimal range or accuracy fall-off, I'm still capable of doing good damage. And basically what I'm saying there is that a large missile will struggle to actually apply damage to things like a slasher interceptor, whereas the large strike cannon will hit that absolutely fine as long as it's in range and as long as the angular velocity isn't too much. The reason I've gone for strike cannons is, as you can see, I've got here an optimal range of 60 kilometers and an accuracy fall-off of 58. If I'm sitting at 100 kilometers, I'm still doing good damage here with the strike cannons. Now, I've achieved that by using Eagle tracking computers. I've got two of these that are boosting up that accuracy fall-off and the optimal range, plus they're giving tracking speed as well, cold, and I can activate these for an even bigger boost. Now that means that basically if I'm sitting away at 100 kilometers, these aren't doing full DPS. They're doing a lot of damage per shot. Don't look at the DPS, look at the damage per shot. 558 thermal, 558 explosive, 368 kinetic. It doesn't matter that the DPS looks low, because that's thanks to a very long 21-second activation time. Ultimately, when these open fire at something, they tend to destroy it in one shot, especially again if it's something like a frigate or a destroyer, and certain cruisers will go down in one hit from a brace of these as well. Then of course the sentry drones are going to be shooting as well. Now, of course, it's not that full effectiveness thanks to the optimal range being 60 kilometers, and we're going to be parked at 100. You can obviously activate one of those tracking computers, and that will push your optimal range right up to about 80 kilometers and mean you're doing much more damage to things sitting at 100 if you absolutely need to blap them instantly. So basically, we're now parked away at 100 kilometers, we're hitting with our strike cannons, we're hitting with the sentry drones. I've got then some nest worm drone damage amplifiers to increase the damage of my drones. Again, the cold, having these fitted, increases the damage of the drones just for having it fitted. You can then activate it like any other weapon upgrade module for more damage. Then for the mid slots. Now this is something that obviously this causes a lot of contention, and the bit in the combat demonstration I'm going to show is explicitly for this. Yes, of course, I've gone for a target painter. If I'm doing a sniping build, target painting is absolutely viable. It's one of the most useful modules you can have, because you're making those smaller targets bigger at range, which makes them a much easier target to hit. The bit that's a bit controversial is that I'm fitting a warp scrambler and a stasis webifier here, and you might be thinking, why on earth would you do that on a sniping fit? Now, this is going to be demonstrated in the combat section of the video, but to give a quick verbal overture to that, basically, the Warp Scrambler switches off any micro-warp drive of a rat that comes close, then the Stasis Webifier slows them down even further, as you can see here, a 61% reduction to the flight velocity. There are going to be times when a ship happens to get a little bit too close for comfort, and gets underneath your guns. Now, with strike cannons and sentry drones, I'm not going to be able to hit anything that is moving at any form of angular velocity. So what I would do then is I'm going to activate the webifier and the scrambler on that target, slow it the hell down to the point that it's a floating brick, then I'm going to swap those drones out for something like some small, medium or standard large drones, and they're going to be able to blap that target much more effectively. It's all about that versatility that we've talked about with drone ships, and I will showcase that in action in just a moment. Finally then, the final two low slots here, I've gone for a Pith C-type large shield booster, just helps me repair any damage that my shields take. Obviously I'm sitting at massive range, so I shouldn't be taking too much damage at all, and we've got a large micro warp drive that allows us to move from A to B, reposition nice and quickly. If things do start getting a bit close, I can power away to a safe point, pick up my sentry drones, move to a safe distance, drop them again, and resume fire. Now, for the rigs here, I've already talked about the drone control range. I've got two drone speed augmenters. Now, these are a little bit confusingly worded. This isn't about how fast your drones move, it's about how fast they shoot. And of course, that is a massive increase there to DPS. Two speed augmenters is better than a firepower augmenter. Now, again, I know a lot of people look at the firepower augmenters and go, oh, well, that only affects sentry drones. No, it does affect standard drones as well, it's just worded poorly. But anyway, for this build we're going for 2 speed augmenters to make sure our drones are firing that little bit faster, and then over on the other side in our engineering rigs, I've gone for 2 targeting system subcontrollers to help me lock onto things that little bit faster, and an auxiliary thruster 3. This just means that if I do need to, like, hammer a quick retreat, I can do so at a slightly faster speed. Now what we're looking at with this fit here is a whopping 1459 DPS, 1459, most of which comes from our drones, 1177 at a distance of 100 kilometers. We then have the turrets adding an additional 282 DPS on top of that. Defensively speaking, 104 is a massive amount of tank there. We can take a big beating before we need to start considering running. Capacitor doesn't look particularly stable, but if we just jump back to the slots there, the only thing you're ever really going to have running at any time, ultimately, is the target painter. You might occasionally have the scrambler and the webifier on something as well, and you might have a shield booster going, but that 2 minutes 09 is based on having everything that you see there active. And remember, even if you're out of capacitor, your drones and your cannons can still fire. I'm not suggesting you should necessarily stick around if you don't have capacitor, but just remember that those weapons aren't chewing into your capacitor banks at all. For targeting, you see the scan resolution is still pretty low at 255, but it's just that little bit more comfortable now thanks to those 2 rigs, helping us lock onto a target faster. We're still a very slow battleship, 216.15 meters per second as standard. That does mean we do push over a kilometer a second with the micro warp drive active, which is nice for looting and just for getting a bit of extra range, but note that warp preparation time. If you are flying one of these through low sec or null sec, do be aware of gate camps, and anything there are going to be able to, and other PvP ships are going to be able to lock you down very quickly before you're able to align and move off to warp. So in certain cases, if you're in a dangerous position, it might be worth pre-aligning and approaching a distant target. That way, if anyone does jump into your anomaly, if you're doing public anomalies that is, you can then just hit warp and jump away to safety. Well worth considering there. Otherwise though, let's undock this, take this out, and showcase it in action. I'm jumping into Angel or Devil, which is the Minmatar Tech 10 storyline mission and considered to be one of the most difficult to clear solo. So I wanted to prove that the Dominix can do it, and yes, it 100% can. I cleared the entire thing, start to finish, in a little under 2.5 hours, not a bad time at all. The reason I want to showcase part 1 isn't because it's the most difficult part, it's not, that is definitely the second encounter, but part 1 had some really interesting little goings on here that I just wanted to showcase. So first of all, once I actually landed here, my first shot there from the strike cannons alone was enough to take out that Gisty Slasher 2 interceptor in one volley. You see then that the sentry drones do the same thing. We're sitting at 77 kilometers away from a target here, and those sentry drones are quite comfortably just ripping apart the shields, the armor, and then the structure, and taking those down basically in one stretch of activation. I get a few misses there, that's thanks mainly to me not having the target painter on, but we clear that first wave no trouble. The second wave is basically the same thing. It's a lot of Slasher 2 interceptors, which again, this time we're going to make sure the target painter's on. You can see it does take a little bit of time to lock onto these, thanks to the target signature radius being very small, and my scan radius being, the scan resolution being quite low as well. Again though, you can see that the sentry drones do rip apart that ship. You can see the amount of damage that each shot from a sentry drone does there to the small target. We're then going to move on to the second one here. I am having a bit of trouble with a lag at this point on the server today. You can see that even though I've selected a different target, it's still going on to the one that I was looking at about 3-4 seconds ago. But again, no problems at all. That's the first 2 waves down before any ship gets closer than 70 kilometers. The next wave then appears. This time around we've got a couple of Slasher interceptors, a Guardian Cyclone there, a Maelstrom, and a Rupture Interdictor. And again, we're just going to lock onto everything. We are going to aim for those small ships first. Now again, I apologise for the footage. I know it's not particularly exciting here, sitting and just looking at the rear end of a Dominix. You can see the sentry drones have just kind of popped out the back. They are actually inside the ship graphic, but hey. This is where things got interesting. This Gisty Slasher 2 interceptor does manage to clear that distance before my drones can handle it. At which point, I decide, right, okay, it's not actually doing anything to me, it's just hitting me with a target painter, and oh no, my 350 meters signature radius is now a little bit bigger. Oh no, whatever will I do? Suddenly they're going to be able to hit me when they weren't before, / sarcasm. So I'm going to pick a different target. This time I'm going for that Gisty Slasher there in the distance. Just checking my little lock-ons there. We are sent to the turret after that. Again, we are struggling to hit it just because it's such a small target and it is moving at fairly big speed, but as it's coming into optimal range now, there we are, we're taking some heavy damage on that Gisty Slasher, down it goes. Onto the Rupture next. And I'm just going to leave this first Slasher 2 Interceptor just orbiting around me slowly. It's not doing particularly much damage to me. You can see I'm still sitting at 85% shields. I am going to top that up a little bit though. I'm barely taking any damage at all, and all it's doing to me otherwise is making my already humongous signature radius just that little bit bigger, which doesn't really matter at all. It's not like things weren't hitting me beforehand. Anyway, there goes the next chip from the Rupture onto the Cyclone, and you'll see we do a good amount of damage. There's that massive shot there from the strike cannons. When you see you're doing like 222 damage up to 1,000, 1,800 damage here, depending on how well and how clearly those sentry drones actually hit. Then you'll see the massive whack there that comes from the strike cannons. It's only one shot every now and then, but there we go. It's just, there it is, whack. 2,512 damage, down it goes. Now, whilst I'm shooting at that, you'll see that I have put the Stasis Webifier and the Warp Scrambler onto the Gisty Slasher 2 Interceptor, and you can see that its fast orbit around me in the distance there has now slowed to a crawl. It's still not going to be enough that my sentry drones or cannons are going to be comfortable dealing with it. There's the lag again, locking onto the Gisty Slasher despite me going onto the Maelstrom. And you can see everything there is missing, which just proves my point that none of those sentry drones or the strike cannons with their tracking, I mean, the sentry drones have a tracking speed of literally like 0.2. It's ridiculously low. Not a hope in hell of hitting a Gisty Slasher 2 Interceptor that is orbiting. So we're going to take out the Maelstrom first. We're going to deal with the Maelstrom, take it out there, because again, it's not a threat, but we're not really worried about that Slasher 2 Interceptor either. So we're just going to deal with the Maelstrom first, because we can comfortably deal with this with the drones that are available. And I'm sure you may have already figured out exactly what we're going to do next. When I say with the drones that are available, yes, we are going to be changing our drones up. So I'm just going to activate both my drone damage amplifiers there to push up the DPS of the drones quite a bit. Let's have a look, see if I can actually do an observe on these. Nope, they are literally inside the hull of the ship here. It's really hard to tap around. You can see it, but only because I'm kind of clipping through the ship. Anyway, back to the Maelstrom, I think, for the time being. I've left the shield booster running a little bit too long here. It has chewed my capacitor, so we will switch that off in just a moment. The Maelstrom, however, is about to go down in the next couple of hits or so. Strike cannon's about to launch. See how much damage that does. There we are, 7,000 damage from the strike cannons. And now we're going to look onto the Slasher, and you'll see what I do here is that I drag one of the drones and hit return all, and I'm going to drag to change. Now this, again, thanks to the insane lag that I'm getting on the test server this morning, does mean this takes a little bit longer than I would like it to, but thank goodness the Slasher at least is doing almost no damage to me at all. So I'm just going to one by one swap all of those Mark 9 Wardens out for Mark 7 Ogres, because I'm an idiot and forgot to pack the Mark 9s. Of course, if you're flying a Mark 9 battleship, you do have access now to Mark 9 drones. But there we are. So now I'm going to send those out. You can see the Slasher Interceptor here is barely moving at all. Those drones come charging out of the drone bay and immediately start to rip apart that Slasher. Look how quickly that's going down now, thanks to me using those drones. Now, if I had medium drones, if I were using something like hammerheads, that would be even better, because medium drones obviously are better at hitting those smaller targets. And that's an interesting point I wanted to mention in the fitting section, and I'm going to come to now. Basically, yes, okay, I've gone for strike cannons. Those strike cannons are doing an additional 200 DPS, from long range. And more important than that, they're doing an insane amount of alpha damage. You've seen up to about 7,000 alpha damage, which is enough to blapse interceptors and other ships off the grid instantly. But if you wanted to, because you're not getting any bonuses at all, you could even fit small autocannons or small snub-nosed or medium snub-nosed, anything you like, into those high slots. Meaning you have your sentry drones there dealing with anything that is at range, like that Gisty Thrasher, bye-bye, and then onto that Slasher and take it down. But if something else gets close, you can then start using the ship's high slots, whatever they may be, they could even be medium rapids or something like that, to take out any targets that happen to get in range. And medium rapids, now that I think on it, is actually probably one of the better options for that, because they've got a decent amount of range to them, and they do happen to catch a lot of those ships that orbit just outside of your web or scrambler range. So if you want to go for the sniper fit like this, you can go for the strike cannons and do massive damage over long range and hopefully blap some of these ships off the grid instantly. I mean, heck, you'll see here comes that strike cannon shot against the Rupture. Let's see how much damage it actually does. It's going to activate 3,000, it's okay, it's only a glancing hit at that point, but we've seen up to 7,000, and that's kind of the point. Or you can put on something there that you then use as kind of an auxiliary amount of damage for anything that gets close. Anyway, folks, that does wrap up everything here that I wanted to talk to about the Dominix. This is a really cool battleship, and I understand why this is going to be so popular. This is quite comfortably doing Angel or Devil, and Angel or Demon, sorry. And I can tell you honestly that as you go into Section 2 onwards, it does still hold its own. You basically do what you saw there earlier. There was a time where one elite ship did get a little bit too close for me. I swapped to the standard drones, and I rip it down that way. Anyway, folks, let me know your thoughts and opinions on the Dominix. Don't forget to jump onto yesterday's Megathron video, enter the competition for a chance to be one of 2 lucky winners for a month of Combo Omega. Otherwise, thank you for watching this one right the way to the end. Happy sailing, and see you in New Eden.